Jesus said in Luke chapter 12 and verse 42, "Who then is that faithful and wise steward or manager, whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household to give them their portion of meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing." This is Jesus talking. "Of a truth I say unto you, that he will make him ruler over all that he hath." Jesus said if we're good managers over what we have, He'll make us managers over a whole lot more than what we don't have in our possession right now. Be faithful over a little, He'll make us faithful or give us much to manage. My name is Charles Vance. I'm along with Terry Sacka, Chief Strategist, here on the Wealth Transfer today. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome everyone to the Wealth Transfer. That was a very pertinent scripture regarding what we're going to talk about today, which is deflation, inflation, and hyperinflation, and kind of just give you a quick rundown of what that means and how that's going to impact your retirement, your future, and your standard of living. Because I think if we're good managers of recognizing this information, we will be better positioned, of course, for that transfer of wealth in the future as the paper money system continues to lose value and the hard asset world continues to grow in value.
Terry, this program is called the Wealth Transfer, and there's a reason that it's named the Wealth Transfer, is because we know that there is wealth that is being transferred every day. It's changing hands. Yes. I've heard people say, I've done wealth seminars around the country and even in other countries, and I've heard people say things, and I'm not making light of this, we've lost our home, as if it vanished in thin air, if you listen to the words. But they really didn't lose their home. Yeah. It transferred ownership. Still at the same address. It's still on the same piece of property. It moved from one owner to another owner. Sometimes that owner is a bank or a finance company. Sometimes it's somebody else that came in, stepped up, purchased the house from that person that was losing the house, losing, quote unquote. But things don't disappear. They don't vanish from the planet. They transfer ownership. And if we don't understand how this current system of money is operating in the earth today, chances are we'll be on the losing end rather than the gaining end. And don't wait. I've heard this in church all of my life, that there's a great end time wealth transfer that's going to take place. Yeah. We got to get ready for it. It's taking place now.
It has been. And if we just would have been taking what God gave us, dominion over the earth, we would have been putting our hard-earned money into earth elements, we would be significantly wealthier today.
What do you mean by in putting our money in earth elements?
Earth elements would be land, gas, oil, gold, silver, things that are of the earth. Remember, gold and silver come out of the earth. You remember, it was even at the end of the, Pishon River, was all just gold just everywhere, right, at the beginning. It's God's. Haggai 2:8, the gold is mine, the silver is mine. And if we're not prepared with knowledge for this transfer that has been taking place, but don't worry, it's not too late, folks. Matter of fact, we're about third, maybe fourth way through. So don't worry. As much as they say everything is getting better, remember, we were collapsing globally. So what they're saying is getting better is really no more than stopping the free fall, but we're still in significant trouble in the system of finance, banking, bonds, world economies and such.
Terry, the average person, when you say something like inflation, would think of maybe a balloon being inflated. Deflation, we're going to let the air out of the balloon. Hyperinflation,
I like that. That's good.
Maybe hyperinflation, we're going to blow the balloon up so big that it explodes.
Yeah.
What are we talking about when we're talking about the economy in the sense of inflation, deflation, hyperinflation?
Well, what had happened, let's start with deflation. Deflation is what they say we're in now. And for folks that have been watching the program, remember we had that chart that showed deflation in Germany at the time, right before they had the hyperinflation and it shot up. Deflation is a period when you have a shock and awe to the system of finance, as we did in 2008. Remember in 2008 when we had that big market collapse and financial collapse, that was very huge, folks. I mean huge. We bailed out everyone we could. We collapsed and closed. Remember, Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, all these companies went out. Washington Mutual Bank, I mean huge companies got consolidated. Now, this was globally, not just the United States. And deflation, really, the definition of deflation is this. When the price of goods drops and it starts going lower, and what happens is people don't spend their money because they don't want to, they figure, well, if the price is going to keep dropping, I'll hold on making that purchase because it'll be cheaper in the future, so I'll just keep waiting. After 2008, everybody held on to their money, and they're waiting. And people are still holding on to their money, and there's a lot of cash on the sidelines. And I mean, Apple Corporation, $180 billion sitting on the sidelines.
So, whoa. You mean Apple has $180 billion in cash just sitting somewhere in a bank?
Sitting somewhere.
Wow.
And that's not just Apple. That's average, mom and pop. It's all of us people, because a lot of people didn't get back in the stock market. A lot of people are in cash. A lot of companies are in cash. They believe that they're the tune of a couple trillion easy in cash, a few trillion in cash.
Just sitting. Now, we live in what I've heard people call a debt-based society, and in a debt-based society, if money is not changing hands, the economy seems to get stagnant.
And that stagnant is the part of the deflation. They didn't call something like stagflation, but deflation is when...
It'd have been more descriptive maybe.
But you know what? That's actually a real statement. They call it stagflation, meaning prices are dropping. And when prices drop, people hold off economic transactions. Businesses don't buy things because they say, hey, why buy a car if the car could be cheaper? Why buy this equipment if it's going to be cheaper? Why buy these supplies if they're going to be cheaper? And in 2008, when the economy collapsed, people held on to buy anything. So people didn't even buy automobiles for years. And that's why you saw automobile sales soar in the last year or so, because people held on to their car for 3-4 years longer than normal. But it's not just holding on to cash before purchases. Deflation is also the lack of credit that a bank can lend to somebody. And we all know this, that the banks haven't been lending as much. It's harder to get loans.
Well, I got to stop you again here. I thought the stimulus money was supposed to fix all of that.
I tell you, wasn't that shocking?
I mean, it honestly, I'm being a little facetious, but it honestly was supposed to do that.
I know, but what happened is the banks kept the money.
So they just put the money in their
They
vault?
needed to. They had to have a certain ratio to stay open. So they took that money, kept it in the vault because they had to. And so not a lot of that money reached the small business person, reached the individual lender. People had a hard time getting car loans, hard time getting home loans. Small businesses have a hard time getting small business loans. It's starting to loosen up. But when you have a lack of credit into this finance system, that's deflation. Folks, what is the greatest deflation we had in the history of America? What do you think it is, Charles?
Oh, gosh, I don't want to
Take one guess. There's only one time in
it
history we hit a major deflation.
Probably the Great Depression.
It was the Great Depression, yeah. The Great Depression was a classic deflation. The banks yanked all that money in, no lending was getting done, and everybody who had something hung on to it for dear life. Great Depression. That's what we've been experiencing similar to that in the last 7 or 8 years.
And it's simply because the cash has to move in a debt-based society.
Right.
Because it has to be shifting from one hand to the other.
That's right.
In order for there to be an appearance of an economic well-being.
That's right. And what we've been seeing in the last 4 years, 5 years is money hasn't been moving. Unemployment is staggeringly high. And please understand, folks, that unemployment number is wrong. There has been millions and millions of people dropping out of the workforce. People who would normally get a job. Millions more have gone on disability. So that unemployment number is wrong. Unemployment is double that probably. But the government, they're just trying to do the best they can to get things going. But that unemployment is not real because people are dropping out of looking for work because they just can't find it anymore.
Terry, I read Henry...
so that's part of this deflation we're seeing, of course.
Henry Ford's biography. Henry Ford's idea was, most people don't know that he didn't make the first car. He made an affordable car.
Right.
And he made a car. His whole idea was to make a car so that his workers could buy the car.
Yep. Right.
And he knew if all of his workers bought a car, they'd have a job to work and make other cars.
And then, of course, their money they'll make will go out and keep spending around.
And he knew that the highways would have to be built. He knew that someone would have to have restaurants so that when somebody drove somewhere, someone would have to be able to have a place to eat. that the
drive-in, remember the drive-in restaurants?
Drive-in restaurants,
A&W root beer,
gasoline would that have to be gasoline stations, and he knew that just the one thing of making something affordable to someone so that they could borrow money to buy it would come back eventually to that same worker, and it was just a circle of money.
Absolutely.
And that's why I say that we live in a debt-based society. If all of the debt stops, I'm trading this for your that.
Yeah. But that debt base was everything. I mean, that movement of money you just described is exactly what we need. But in the last 5 years, we've had deflation. Now, deflation is bad, folks. And so let me just tell you, when we're in any inflation period, they want it just incrementally to move. But if it moves extremely down or up, we have problems. Now, we've been printing literally couple $1 trillion between stimulus and printing in QE1, QE2, we're now in QE3.
What's QE?
Quantitative easing, meaning they print money out of thin air and do things with it. We're up to QE3 now, and I contend we're going to have a 4, but when 4 hits, watch out. And so I want to say for those people who have retirement accounts, IRAs, you can turn those IRAs roll it over into a hard asset precious metals IRA. If you want to look to protect your retirement accounts and look for information on how to do so, you can register on our website, and we'll go ahead and send you this information. It's free. It's just information filled with graphs and details on how to go about doing that so you can be better educated in making a decision on how to protect and preserve your retirement assets. Because deflation has been going on for about 4 or 5 years. Now we're getting ready to see inflation, but we have seen inflation. Now, they're telling us we haven't seen it by the economy standards. They're saying it's only 1 or 2%. Folks, inflation's been like 10% and higher every year. And if you don't believe me, of course, gasoline, $1 to $4. I paid $4.30 last week for gas.
What was gas? How long has it been since it was $1?
Oh, it's probably now about 6, 7 years now. I remember, well, it's $2 when the President Obama took over.
It's doubled.
It's doubled since the president has taken over.
Just a little over 4 years.
Yeah, so not only has gasoline doubled since President Obama has taken over, we also have added 6 to 7 trillion more into our national deficit. So we've been printing staggering amounts of money in the last 4 years.
Wow.
Oh, it's huge. And so what we're going to end up getting to...
I don't think people don't first of all, people don't understand $1 trillion. And someday you need to bring that chart so that we can show people that trillion thing compared to a billion and a million. It's beyond the scope of the average person's imagination. All of the billionaires in the world don't even get close to $1 trillion. It's just crazy.
It's a really strange thing to see as a phenomena. They try to do it slowly so we don't recognize it, and that's why people haven't really been properly protected. Those who were smart and bought farmland became that way, or they had their assets in hard assets over the term of their life, are dramatic, staggering millionaires. Look at where all the wealth is. The wealth is in the energy companies. The wealth is in areas where they're hard assets.
And all of that stuff is when we've talked about this over and over again on these programs, it's things that God told us to take dominion over.
That's right.
And to be good managers. I read this verse out of Luke chapter 12, where that he said that we've got to become a faithful and wise manager. That's faithful means trustworthy over the things that we have in our possession. And he's not, believe me, Jesus is not talking about paper money or the stock market when he's talking about something that would be tangible, because that's what he gave us dominion over.
Yeah, especially back in that day. Think about it. If we would have just continued doing exactly that, where would we be today? But we got into this kind of Wall Street mentality, and it's really wrecked us in a lot of ways. And what happens is, as we're printing money, now this is a staggering statistic, Charles. Folks, this is unbelievable. In January alone, 1 month, our Federal Reserve gave $1.2 trillion to European banks. They did it in what they call currency swap the currency around. And they did that to prop it up. I don't know if you remember last year, Spain and Italy were in tremendous trouble. Europe's in trouble, by the way. I
want to interrupt you, because you need to explain to people what this currency swap meant, what it means.
Well, they just took, they gave dollars for euros. So they took the euro dollars and they swapped them for American dollars, and it was a way 1-to-1. 1-to-1 is a way to kind of prop up the system.
So it propped up Europe system.
Your banks. Because remember, folks, this is incredible stuff. Spanish banks, Spain, Italy, they're struggling right now. Greece, they're struggling with 25, 30% unemployment. Unbelievable, staggering numbers. Spanish banks are owned by the French banks. French banks are owned predominantly, not all of them, but predominantly by the English banks. English banks owned predominantly by the American banks. They're all interwoven, so when one system goes down, the whole system goes down.
So there is no question, for me, that's why the IMF is in place.
Yes.
The International Monetary Fund.
Right.
And the World Bank.
Yes.
Which the World Bank pretty much controls all of those banks in a network, as it were.
Yeah, sort of in a network, but the World Bank also helps in loans to impoverished nations. Is a big part of what they do.
Well, where does the World Bank money come from?
Right. Yeah, the members. That's right. And so what we're seeing is Europe has printed trillions of euros. As we saw last week, China has printed $80 trillion China has printed in 10 years to keep their currency value down. America's printed trillions of dollars to keep our currency down. Japan just recently did it. So all this money printing, here's how inflation is going to work, folks. This is amazing. Right now we don't see it because we see deflation, meaning prices of goods and services are coming down because we're all holding on to our money.